Iran has fired ballistic missiles at what it calls the spy headquarters of Israel in northern Iraq. Some missiles fell near the US consulate. I'm Barkha, Dutt, you're with the Mojo story, this big international story this evening. This development coming hours after Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar was in Iran, where he expressed India's grave concern at the attacks that have been taking place on merchant ships, including those docking in India. Most of these attacks have been carried out by Yemen-based but Iran-backed Houthi groups. Now, with Iran's ballistic missile strike targeting Israel, but also in a sense, making a statement to the United States, the diplomatic challenges for India mount. All of this is happening at a time when there are challenges on multiple fronts. There's the China factor, there's what's happening with the Maldives, and in the escalating tension between India and the United States, or rather between Iran and the United States, beg your pardon, India will be under increasing pressure to take aside even as it walks the diplomatic tightrope. To talk about the geopolitical implications of all that is unfolding, global war crowds, really. Let's introduce our panelists on the program today. Joining us is veteran diplomat, Ambassador Navteej Sarna. Welcome to the program, sir. Also joining us is Ambassador Arun Singh, another veteran diplomat. Also joining us is Admiral Shekhar Sinha, who's today with the India Foundation. Welcome to the program. And also joining us is military veteran, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, who's with the Vivekanand Foundation. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Let me start with you, if I may, Navteej Sarna, Ambassador Sarna. This happening hours after Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar was in Tehran. I'm not trying to join the dots between the timing, but it does underline how many tightropes India is possibly simultaneously walking. What do you make of the timing and also the decision by Iran to target the Mossad base in northern Iraq?
Well, I thank you, Barkha. Thank you for calling me here. I wouldn't, unnecessarily link the two things that the Indian foreign minister was there and these strikes happened. I mean, I would be hard put to make a connection there. But I think it just underlines the fact that there is a pattern of escalation that has been taking place over the last few days. There was a certain inevitability about what has happened today. I think this has been, there have been strikes earlier, both against the US and by the US in Iraq and Syria. You know, there have been strikes by the Houthis in the Red Sea and counter US-UK strikes. There have been strikes against Hamas and Hezbollah targets, and there have been strikes within Iran. I mean, the biggest terrorist strike that has taken place since the Iranian Revolution happened a couple of weeks ago. Not at the hands of
which the Islamic State claimed responsibility
yes,
for.
and at the hands possibly of the Islamic State. So there has been a definite escalation building up. Everybody is at an edge, and sooner or later, it was inevitable that Iran, who has, by all reports, for its own reasons, shown a certain amount of restraint about its direct participation, but has been active through its proxies, the several different proxies in the region since October 7 and since the beginning of the Gaza operation. There was an inevitability that Iran would come in. Now, I am not in the know whether or not our foreign minister was, informed of this or had knowledge about what was happening. But I think from what one reads in the press, the focus of his visit was predominantly bilateral. Naturally, it was, the focus seems to have been connectivity, but it is not imaginable that the happenings in West Asia would not have been discussed in detail.
No, absolutely. And just to clarify, I wasn't drawing a connection necessarily between the timing of Mr. Jaishankar's visit and what Iran has done, but just merely observing that there are multiple, as I said, balancing acts in a sense that India has to manage at this point. And that's the reason I made that observation. Ambassador Arun Singh, both you and Ambassador Sarna have served as ambassadors to the United States and to Israel. Here, Israel was the target with a strong message to the United States. The United States has been asking India to join the naval coalition that is trying to protect merchant ships in the Red Sea. The Indian Navy has deployed our own warships and missile destroyers in the Arabian Sea, but it's staying out of any US-led coalition. Given what's happened with Iran, do you think the pressure will mount on India to take a side? And do you think India must inevitably, to borrow Navtej's word, now pick a side?
No, I don't think India has to pick a side. And just walking back a few steps from what you said, uh, Iran has claimed that the targets they struck were some base related to Mossad. Now, we don't know.
Yeah.
So something has been struck, and Iranians saw that or have projected that the adversarial activity directed against them had some origin there. So we have to take it as that. The US consulate, as reported, was nearby but not hit. But in the past, Iranian supported elements have targeted US presence both in Iraq and Syria, and the US have responded to that. Now, how the US assesses the present action, we have to wait and see. The second point is that Iran Israel contestation in the region has now gone on for several years. Iranian nuclear scientists have been killed in the past, and it has been, no claims were made, but there have been attributions suggesting or questioning whether Israel was behind that. There was a major Iranian haul of nuclear related material and documents that were taken away by the Israeli spy agencies from Iran, and those documents were brought into the public domain. And then Iran supported elements, Hezbollah and others, have been targeting Israel, and Israel has been carrying out airstrikes, campaigns against what was seen as Iranian missiles and other things being transported to the Hezbollah. So that contestation has been going on. Given what is happening now, and I think India's basic approach on various issues, be it on Israel, Hamas, Russia, Ukraine, has been not necessarily to take a side, but to articulate what is in India's interest and follow that position. And I think similarly, the current scenario, they will assess how India's interest is playing out. What does it mean in terms of energy security? What does it mean in terms of the Indian origin diaspora in the Gulf? And then they will take a position. Even earlier, when the US had done major sanctions against Iran, India had not formally taken a side, but had followed the requirement of US sanctions, because Indian companies did not want to come for their own cost benefit analysis to be exposed to US sanctions. So, and then even now, India has not joined the Operation Prosperity Guardian that the US is leading, because it does not necessarily want to be directly identified with specific US action, because US will take that action based on its own assessments and interests. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it has a presence in the Indian Ocean. To respond to challenges related to piracy, attacks on shipping, showing that it has an interest, it has a presence. And if you recall, one ship was hit to only about 250 miles of the Indian coast and was coming to an Indian port. So Indian interests are directly affected, which India has to respond to. So I think India can try and take care of its interest without necessarily taking a side.
Okay, talking about these attacks on ships, including, as you mentioned, a ship that was heading for the New Mangalore port, just about 200 nautical miles from Porbandar, FM Jaishankar makes the point about India's grave concern in Tehran at a joint press conference, given that much of these attacks have been carried out by the Houthis that are backed by Iran. That was an interesting development. Let's listen to him, and then I'll come to the general and the admiral. Listen in.
Both of us are concerned about recent events in West Asia, which some call Middle East, and we emphasized the importance of preventing further escalation of violence and hostilities. As you are all aware, there have also been recently a perceptible increase in threats to the safety of maritime commercial traffic in this important part of the Indian Ocean. The minister also referred to it. We have even seen some attacks in the vicinity of India. This is a matter of grave concern to the international community. Obviously, it also has a direct bearing on India's energy and economic interests. This fraud situation is not to the benefit of any party, and this must be clearly recognized.
I want to start with you, General Sharma, because the last time we were talking about this, you made a rather interesting and provocative argument saying merchant ships cannot be the concern of nation states. India should not get entangled in this. Now, of course, something very different has happened since then. We have an estimated 10 warships and destroyers in the Arabian Sea. Do you still believe, because I just heard Ambassador Arun Singh make the point that India's interests are directly, in a sense, impacted by these attacks, and do you still believe that commercial ships have to find a different mechanism to look after themselves? Because trade, the price of oil, everything is linked to safe passage in these waters. General Sharma, so I'll start with you.
Thank you, Barkha. Before taking on this one, I'll address two small issues. One is that Tehran Times carried a news item yesterday saying that the foreign minister of India, when he came to Tehran, he brought a message from the United States government saying that they should ask Houthis to stop targeting the Red Sea merchant fleet. To which President Raisi, in his remarks to the foreign minister, has said that we will do so if you ask the Israelis to stop doing operations in Gaza. This has been carried by Tehran Times, quoting official sources in Tehran. And we have not actually come out to say that this has not happened and we were not carrying a message from the United States. That's one part. Yeah. Second part, I talk about these missile attacks that you have been rightly referring to. Have they conveyed a message? I think the messaging are very clear. Firstly, they did not use any proxies, as Ambassador Sarna was saying, or what the Iranians call them as allies. They did not use any one of the allies, the Hezbollahs or the Hamas or the youth or the Houthis, to fire at these targets here. They fired it themselves using the IRGC from East Azerbaijan, their province of East Azerbaijan, and they hit the targets across there, and they claimed that we did it. So that's one part. Second, they showed capability. We have the capability of hitting the American consulate in Erbil because they hit just about 300-400 meters away. So they have conveyed a message to the Americans that we have precise capability of targeting the place we want to target. They also showed that we have the precise coordinates of the targets that we want to address, because they said we hit IS, Islamic State. We also hit the Mossad camp, which was actually being protected right next to the American consulate. So, there are grave messaging being conveyed, and also that the Americans did not have the capacity to take the missile down, which they have been doing for Houthis. Here in northern Iraq, the Americans did not have the capability of downing that missile, which also is a capability being shown by. So the messaging, and also to their own public. The own public was feeling the Iranians are not doing a thing. Now, to answer specifically your question, the quantum of the fleet that passes across in Indian Ocean and across the world, now, is it earthly possible to protect every ship which is going across in the mercantile zones? So there are many ships across the world which carries private security companies. There are nations who carry people like this. So it's why is that I, as a owner of a ship, I'm entitled to carry a private security company, and all others are not entitled to carry private security companies. Even if it's a small strength, at least you deny the piracy part of it. If you can't deny the drone striking or the missile striking, the point is that the seas are so vast. How do you protect the entire lot of seas unless you put an umbrella across there? Therefore, it is essential that there is a systemic being arrived at. I know nations will hate the idea of a ship coming to my port which has got people with weapons. But then you can't do. The world has changed. The changing world entitles you to start doing some adaptability and bring some dynamism and thinking process. The past cannot be the solution for the future.
So let me pick up 2 points that you made. One was about a possible mediatory role between, Iran and the US. Is India playing that role? The second, on the capacity showed by Iran, and the third point I'll first take to Admiral Sinha, Shekhar Sinha, the merchant ships. Why are nation states getting involved in this? The answer, I'm sure you'll have a take, but one answer might be that groups like the Houthis are state-backed. We are not talking actually about pirates. This is not a piracy situation. This is a very different situation. But go ahead, Admiral.
Well, thank you, Barkha, for getting me on your program. I think one has to realize that India also has a commitment to the world, to the region, that we will ensure free passage and free navigation to the global commons. After all, it is not only impacting India's economy, it is impacting economy of many, many countries. And therefore, it is our regional, it is our collective duty to protect the ships from what they're entitled to as per the UNCLOS. So there, I think that, there are 2-3 ways to do it. One is that the Navy has already deployed 8 to 10 ships in various parts of the Arabian Sea, which is fine. So if there is any missile attack on any of the merchant ships after they have come out of Gulf of Aden, they should be able to intercept it. That is one. Second thing is, inside the Red Sea, I don't recommend joining any coalition. India doesn't have to take any part. However, it has been done earlier that the Red Sea ships, when it was at peak of piracy, they were all lined up in a column, and they used to be escorted with one warship in front and one warship at the back. And therefore, in case there is a missile attack or any other attack, the warships can engage them from wherever they are and protect the merchant ships. That arrangement works. You don't have to be part of the alliance. We were actually doing this in conjunction or in cooperation with the PLA Navy. So because this is a global common, every seafarer, the Navy also has, a country also has a commitment to the seafarer under the IMO, International Maritime Organization. So that is number one. Second thing that some of us have suggested to the government and to the Navy, that why don't we quickly form a United Nations maritime peacekeeping fleet and give this task to them and let them escort these ships inside the Red Sea, as I mentioned, in a column. And I think that, and it is quite prohibited to attack the blue beret people. And I think the United Nations, if they can have a peacekeeping force on land, why not at sea? And they are doing very much. I mean, they can be fully loaded, warship, and they can do the protection and they can take turns. Under UN umbrella, I think India will be quite happy to sort of do this. I think we've got 2 of the very distinguished ambassadors here, and they will probably be able to say more. But I think that, working under UN umbrella is any day acceptable. And Indian Navy doing this to rest of the, the traffic is almost 150 to 160,000 ships in a year, Barkha, in Indian Ocean. There may be 10 ships or 15 ships at one time in Red Sea, but how about the rest? And this is really dangerous. Second point, the attack on the Liberian sort of flagship, or before that, a ship which was only 220 odd miles from Gujarat. The inimical forces to India can take advantage of this, and they can also launch a drone attack from a third-party ship inside the Arabian Sea. What happens to that? So it's a really a warning sign, and I'm sure that our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, would have spoken about all this to the Iranians. Barkha.
General Sharma, briefly, if you want to respond to that, if what we were discussing was a UN-led coalition at sea, would your perspective be different, or would you still argue that merchant ships are not the headache of nation states?
So, Barkha, this is personal views, and I'm speaking my personal self. I am not enamored by the United Nations peacekeeping forces, even on ground. You see, there is the UNIFIL lying there in between Lebanon and Israel, and also between in Golan Heights. What's happening? Whoever is entitled to is firing across on top of the UNIFIL. What's happening in Congo? I mean, best is that they are only being employed largely in Africa. Where have we, even in Nagorno-Karabakh, we didn't employ it. The Russians send their own peacekeeping forces. So to talk about peacekeeping forces, you'll have to study peacekeeping in general. And I don't think I carry the views that the peacekeeping is a possibility. Firstly, they won't agree. The 5 will not agree. they will combat between themselves and use all kinds of vetoes to come out with why it should not be done. So I don't think, if it happens, it's very good. But I don't think that will be a solution. Peacekeeping is not a success story in the long run, I would say so.
Okay, let me come to to Ambassador Arun Singh. Ambassador Singh, this idea which General Sharma referred to, that India has a mediatory role. Now, India is not going to acknowledge that officially if it's happening. It's not going to confirm or deny what's come in the Tehran Times, as General Sharma said. But obviously, the timing raised eyebrows, right? You have the American-led naval coalition bombing the Houthis, and then you have Jaishankar in Tehran, and then you have Iran firing ballistic missiles. I mean, even if no one officially admits it, someone's going to try and join all of these dots. Do you believe there's space for India to play mediator here? Give me a second, sir. I can't hear you. Yeah, now go ahead. Yeah.
I'm saying I don't think India has a plan or should try to play a mediatory role. I think the positions are so entrenched and so complex that mediators often get burnt in the process. But certainly, I don't rule out the fact that Indian foreign minister, before going to Tehran, if you saw, had a conversation with the US Secretary of State. And there could be certain aspects mentioned in that conversation about how they want to see things develop in the context of the Red Sea. And you can't rule out that elements of those conversations were conveyed by him in this conversation with the Iranians. But that doesn't really suggest a mediatory role. It was just conveying what expectations are, how to proceed with the situation as it is now. Because it is in India's own interest to try and see that what's happening in the Red Sea calms down, because not just our energy security, but trade is being impacted. If you saw a report, the Indian Commerce Ministry has set up a group to monitor what's happening to the imports and exports from India. Because if they come around the Cape of Good Hope, then the time frame is going to be expanded, costs will go up, supply chain will be disrupted, prices could be impacted. So there is an impact potentially on the Indian economy, and therefore it's something of great concern to India. And not just India. If you look at Egypt, they must be losing a lot of money, because they get money from all the container and ship traffic passing through the Suez Canal. And if that gets disrupted, so I'm sure they're not very comfortable with what's happening.
Yeah, I think I was reading that there's a 44% drop in value on trade through the Suez Canal. But Ambassador Navteej Sarna, let's talk about something we haven't spoken about. You see, the Middle East, West Asia, call it what you will, you could still localize that and say, okay, that's Israel, Gaza spilling over into the region. India has concerns, but not directly. Closer home, we have what's happening with Maldives. We have China. There's been long time speculation that China would want some sort of permission for a military base. You now have the Maldivian president saying, get your troops, all 75 of them, out by the 15th of March. The reason I raise this is almost in every sort of ocean, the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, you are seeing spillover geopolitical spills, for lack of a better word. How do you see what's happening there in the Indian Ocean, Ambassador Sarna?
I think, Barkha, I mean, the two theaters that you mentioned may not be directly related, but what is related is the fact that we are now living in a time of geopolitical rivalries. We are living at a time when a lot of centers have dissolved. We are living at a time when the UN and the so-called quote-unquote rule-based international order is really not at work any longer. And you find it, you started with, Russia and Ukraine. The Gaza conflict was always in danger of escalating, given the kind of conflict or the kind of operation it has been in Gaza and the deep involvement. So what we are lacking really is the focus on resolving the fundamental problems out there, and that's about West Asia. I mean, we've been focusing on the wrong thing. We've been focusing on this so-called normalization. When I say we, I mean the world. there's been focus on the normalization of Saudi and Israel, of the other, the so-called Abraham Accords, and presuming that the problem will go away. The problem is not going to go away, as October 7th shows. It's only going to get worse. And I don't think that point has still stuck home. And I think in this time, China is a major player in this geopolitical rivalries. And China is pushing not just towards regional hegemony, not just towards a tremendously improved presence in the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea, something which it did not have in the past, but it is actually challenging not just India, but the United States for supremacy in every theater that it can. And they've been quiet relatively in West Asia, but they're not going to be quiet in other places, because you see there are several flashpoints. We still haven't started talking about Taiwan, and I'm just hoping that that thing doesn't light up just at this moment, because then we are into a real conflagration. So these are very uncertain times, and I think also at this we are at a time when every country seems to be out for themselves.
That is, I think that's a great point, except and it'll also be interesting to see what happens at the International Court of Justice, where Israel has actually been taken to court. But Admiral Sinha, the reason I mentioned two separate theaters of conflict in the same program is because I think India has to navigate both of those tumultuous waters, right? And China is, in my estimation, something we need to talk about when we talk about our own security challenges. Even when we talk about what's happening in the Maldives, we can pretend that beach tourism is what is the dispute, but it isn't really. It's just a little trigger for something much deeper that's going on. Admiral Sinha?
This is a little more serious issue closer home, and I think India will continue to face a lot of headwinds there, and you can see the beginning already. But I have also noticed that yesterday there was a demonstration against the president having taken this decision. Also, some of the guys of his own party, and some of the guys who belong to the party of Mr. Yamin, the former president. So therefore, it is not the entire population which is against India. India out was a sort of slogan. It was given only to win the election, and that is because the two parties are in coalition. But they're not. The Moizu is only a compromise candidate. He does not reflect everybody's view. So I have a feeling that we have to wait and watch. The 75 people coming out, etc., their own people will start, protesting, because it has saved 500 lives, Barkha, in last 5 years. They were all patients who were about to die. They were lifted from one island and brought to the hospital, which is again run by the Indian doctors and nurses. So I think that the public opinion is slowly turning away, and I wouldn't be surprised that he does not get his full tenure in Maldives. I know it's very big prediction to make, but I will really stick my neck out, because this is the kind of thing will happen. Otherwise, till then, 20 agreements he has signed with China. And let me tell you that no aspect of daily life is left out in that. So they will penetrate every damn life of Maldivians if that the agreement actually gets into the worksheets.
Yeah, and of course this is not about the people of Maldives, but if I can just bring in Navtej briefly, because I know we made a little error on our banner. You were making a point about China's presence, in the Maldives. It's China's fingerprints all over what's happening, doesn't it?
Well, China has been exerting itself not just in the Maldives, but in our entire ocean region, as the Admiral would know better. There is the famous attempted string of pearls, the set of ports around India, deep into the Arabian Sea, which can, at a switch of a button, can become operational naval ports. So yes, China's presence as part of its naval expansion has been very much there in the Indian Ocean and in the Arabian Sea, and it is seeking influence in each of the areas, in each of the countries that are around India, and that we have always presumed to be so-called in the Indian zone of influence. So there,
Yeah.
I don't need to get into naming the countries, but it's quite obvious.
General Sharma, before I give Ambassador Arun Singh the last word, I know you have a sort of contrarian view on the merchant ships, on the practicality of what is happening. But the fact is, as has been said on this program by almost everybody, you have a parallel set of rivalries and parallel theaters of conflict. And India, while as a sort of very significant country on the global stage, also has its own immediate neighborhood and security to look after. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Barkha, look, first point I will make is that we have over the years worked with inimical governments. Musharraf, I mean, he was the Karta Dharta of Kargil. He came to India. Ziaul Haq came to see a cricket match. Ziaul Haq, imagine. He came to see a cricket match in India. We worked with Prime Minister Khalida Zia. We worked with Prime Minister Oli. We have worked, our diplomacy has been so effective, even against inimical governments. So what? If there is an inimical government today with Maldives, I think we will find a method. There are patients coming from Malé who are being picked up and brought to Kerala for treatment. There is people to people connect of a kind which we can't even imagine here. So I think there are ways here which will go outside the narrow percepts of the government stating anti-India views, etc. I think this is a matter of time. We'll sort it out. Second point I wish to make is about, look at the landlocked countries. Bangladesh is the second largest purchaser of weapons from China, from tanks to aircraft, from port BNS Sheikh Hasina made by the Chinese, for ASIC submarines which Bangladeshis don't have. So you can imagine, and you see the Tarai region in Nepal, the amount of work being done by the Chinese in the Tarai region of Nepal, which touches the borders between India, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. So the fact of the matter is that China is making inroads all over the place. It's not the oceans. They have deep pockets. They have methodology of doing it, and they are doing it. Now we have to take this issue into advisement, saying that, okay, the Chinese will do what the Chinese will do. We have to do our bit to make sure that our cultural connects and all other connects that we have with the region, that we are able to perform much better despite the competition that the Chinese are providing us.
Okay, let me give the last word to Ambassador Arun Singh. You opened by saying, when I say we, I mean India doesn't have to pick a side. We're going to navigate this in the way that we quintessentially have. But as Foreign Minister Jaishankar has famously said, we have moved from non-alignment to multi-alignment. And Naftej made the point, Ambassador Sana made the point about each country out for themselves. India too increasingly guided by our own self-interest, our own national interest. Where for you should foreign policy and strategic affairs focus lie today? Is there a red flag? Is that where you think our attention should be?
No, I think first, of course, there is the broad effort at the strategic level. And that, if you see in terms of the comments made by our leaders, is clear that sustain the relationship with Russia, deepen the partnership with the US, and strengthen yourself to deal with the challenge from China. So that's the broad strategic frame. Now, within that, then you respond to various situations. On the Russia-Ukraine conflict, for example, India did not go along with the US position, did not vote against Russia, but distanced itself from Russia by supporting sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries. And the Prime Minister told President Putin that this is not an era of war. On the Israel-Hamas conflict, India has come out very strongly against terrorism, and the Prime Minister tweeted that India supports Israel in the stance against terrorism, but then also that international humanitarian law needs to be observed, and that the diplomacy is the way forward. So the effort has been to chart out our own path. So I think in terms of the escalation that is happening in West Asia and in the Red Sea, I think India's basic message would be that our interests are also being impacted, and a way has to be found that the interests of developing countries and others, and it's not just India, we spoke about Egypt, countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, they're all going to be impacted, that their interests also need to be taken into account. So I think that would be the argument going forward.
Well, never a dull moment, and in fact, a distinct phase of global tumult unfolding in different theaters of conflict. Thank you very much, gentlemen, to Admiral Sinha, General Sharma, Ambassador Sarna and Singh. Thank you, and to our audience, thank you. See you soon. Mojo's Story has always made a commitment to its viewers to go to where the story is. And as you can see here, we are at the epicenter of the Israel war on Gaza. We are right at the front line, about 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli military gets ready with its tanks and its gunners to begin its final frontal assault that will take troops into Gaza. As we said, we are not like other organizations. We believe in giving you all sides of the story objectively and as much as possible from the ground. And that's exactly what we're doing here, covering the biggest global story today from the epicenter of the war zone. So please, we need your support. Support us, become a Mojo member, subscribe to us, spread the word, and thank you for your support.